I'm Kevin Davis. This is the Catholic Family Podcast, and I have I think this is going to be a really good show today. And we're live, so everyone who's going to join us here live and be in the comment section, we really appreciate it. This is going to be a political podcast, clearly from the title. So if you don't want a political podcast, then please join the next one. I'm sure my mom has a feast day quick take coming up. But we're not going to be talking about Trump and Kamala. So that will be something we'll talk about sometime in the future. We've talked about it in the past. That is not the topic for today. We want to talk about other parts of the discussion. And really, at least from my perspective, I want to make sure that people understand how important it is to vote, even if you don't want to vote for Donald Trump. So that's kind of my perspective. We're also going to talk, Father's going to talk. Father, thank you very much for being here, Father Geckle. We're going to talk a bit about the church's perspective on voting. We're going to talk a bit about republic versus democracy. And then we're going to go into individual voting policies or what's it called? I'm forgetting the word. Anyway, different things that people are voting for in each different state. We're going to talk a bit about the morality of each and the importance of why, again, you should go and vote, even if you just cannot find a way to vote for Donald Trump. So, Father, thank you for joining. Dad, Eric, thanks for being here. Everyone in the chat, we appreciate you being here. And everyone who's watching this, please, right now is even a good time to do it too while you listen to us, to go and find propositions. That's the word. And I think different states have it differently. But what would you be voting for down ticket? You should be able to find that online. And we'd love it if you can go find those and we can talk about it later in the show. And again, the idea being to show everyone how important it is to vote, even if you have Trump derangement syndrome, or not, or if you just don't want to vote for Trump, which I'm kidding. I actually do understand why people wouldn't want to do that. I will vote for him, but I get the reasoning why you wouldn't. So, Father Geckle, you want to start maybe on, because I think that's obviously the best place to start, is a bit of the church's perspective on voting.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. I wanted to just read briefly some quick excerpts. This isn't any in-depth whatever, but just from a couple of various authors. I'm just going to do two just because of time, but just really quickly, I found 4 or 5 quick references, all saying the same thing. And I think it's good to point out that a lot of times with these kind of issues, the church gives us principles to follow, but the application of them isn't always as clear in individual circumstances or particular cases. And with regard to voting, you have principles that the church says we have an obligation to vote under certain circumstances, but at the same time, there's some you might say wiggle room, or there's some nuance, or the church leaves up to people's conscience to determine whether what they think they need to do on the matter. And I think in our day, with so much information out there, where people get their information from one source or another, there's just so much information for us to say there's just a black and white, clear cut, for sure, you must do this, or you must vote for this person or not. I understand people that say they're not going to vote. I understand that. I don't think it's the right decision. And I'll get into that in a little bit, but I could definitely understand why people don't, because of the information that they have, with it, that they read, that they've consumed. So anyway, without blabbering on much longer, just want to read from 2 different books here. What one is My Catholic Faith. This is, everybody should be familiar with it, I think. Very good book. In this chapter 105 on civic duties, it talks about voting, and it says every Catholic who has the right to vote should exercise that right. Matters closely connected with the life of the people are the constant subject of legislation or debate. Even if your vote does not enable the good candidate to win, at least it will lessen the margin of his defeat. And I like to tell people that, if you don't like voting for Trump, or if you don't like voting for this candidate or whatever else, or you see him as a bad guy, I can understand where you're coming from on that. But the way I see it, it's a vote against the other side, or a vote against the greater harm done, that would be done. If you had a situation where you had a group of people saying, hey, there's a bunch of houses burning down over here, and I believe that we need to go and put out the fire at one house, and somebody else says, I think we should go over there and try to save all three houses because their lives matter too. And, just say we're not going to do either
Hmm.
doesn't make any sense. You got to do something. That's a very simple analogy that I think of with regard to that. And analogies can only be taken so far. I understand that, but I think it illustrates the point. It goes on to say, um, it is the Catholic voter's duty to vote for candidates that will act justly in questions of morals and have the Christian principles at heart. We don't have that. Somebody might stop there, but keep reading. Those who do, a Catholic elector must not vote for any candidate who despises the teaching of Christianity. If you stop there, well, that would settle. We could never vote, and I don't think we would ever be able. No one in America could have ever voted if you just follow
Right.
that. But it may happen that all the candidates for an office are indifferent or hostile to religion. In that case, if no other candidate can be made available, the Catholics should vote for the one least hostile to Christian principles, most moral in his qualities. And lest someone think that that's just one author, one person saying that, another book which is excellent. This is Moral and Pastoral Theology by Davis. Not a relative of the Davises here.
Do we know that
SJ,
though?
maybe distantly. But this is an excellent moral theology book. It's used in seminaries. It was 1938 publishing from an earlier first edition in 1935. But this is an excellent moral theology book. And they have one short section here. It is the duty of all citizens who have the right to vote to exercise that right when the common good of the state or the good of religion and morals require their votes, and when their voting is useful. Now, I could totally see where some people would say, our votes don't count, it's all rigged anyway, so our voting isn't useful, so we have no obligation to vote. Valid argument. If that's what you believe, if that's what you think is the reality, then that's a valid reason.
If I can jump in real quick,
Yes.
Father, we actually have a comment to that effect in California, and I am very much of the mind that he's right. In California, they literally just rig the machines there and tell you what your vote was, and your votes don't matter. So no, that's a good point.
Yeah, it is a good point, and that's why I made the earlier statement that I don't think that we can just make a blanket statement and say yes, you absolutely have to, under pain of sin, you must do this. There's some nuance here in the application of this, with different factors being fulfilled. I would add to that, and of course it's going to differ from state to state, but I would add to that, depending on where you are, I mean, I don't see why they would put so much time, effort, money, into propaganda if it didn't matter anyway. If they just had your vote anyway, and it didn't matter. So I do think depending on where
Father,
you are.
but I would think too. Don't you want to err on the side of caution, even if you're
Right.
just really sure,
Right.
like, hey,
Yes.
it's not going to count. There's just no way. It's all rigged. Well, what do you lose from going and voting for the things that you think matter? I mean, I just don't really. I mean, I understand the argument, like you say, Dad. Maybe that's the case in some states, or maybe it's the case in the entire country. I think after
It's not in the whole
2020,
country,
I think
for
that's a
sure.
legitimate concern. But
Yeah.
wouldn't you rather say, hey, you know what, maybe that's the case, but I still cast my vote and I let my voice at least possibly be heard? I don't see why would you not err on that side? I suppose that's kind of my perspective on it. But sorry, Father.
And you're good. Make it harder for them. If you have enough
Right.
people, doing something about it, it's going to shape policy going forward. Okay, just continuing on, and I'll wrap it up quickly here. Note this. It says, first of all, it is sinful to vote for the enemies of religion or liberty, except to exclude a worse candidate, or unless compelled by fear of great personal harm relatively greater than the public harm at stake. But in politics, great latitude is rightly claimed by all citizens. It goes on some other things in there. That point there, it is sinful to vote for the enemies of religion or liberty, except to exclude a worse candidate. Here, some people say that they're not going to vote for this person or that person because they don't believe in lesser of two evils, that's a legitimate thing and they don't feel right. Catholic moral theology books, etc., don't agree with that position. They say otherwise. So I wanted to bring that up because I think we all know people that have that position, and I don't think it agrees with the church's teaching on the matter. And that's, as I said, Catholic Catechism book, moral theology book. I had the Baltimore Catechism and some other theology books as well, but I'll just leave it there. They're all consistent.
I appreciate that, Father, and I think that's the perfect way to start the show. And again, So that's the basis. I think exactly we want to start from what the church teaches us. And to me, it's really clear. I mean, if you look at these two candidates, and I am no Trump worshiper, certainly, but it's I just don't think it's even a question who is the better option. I mean, the Democrats want abortion full term, and there's so many different things where it is worse. Now, I'm not saying Trump again. I don't think he's even pro-life, but he's certainly more pro-life than Kamala. And it's just not. It's just clear. I mean, and we can even say that really clearly because they've both been in office. I mean, Kamala ran the last 4 years practically, and Trump ran. He was president for 4 years too. We know what they've actually done, and Trump did sign in judges who were at least helpful to the pro-life, idea. And again, not everything's about pro-life. Dad and I have talked about that too. It's about anti-war, which is very clear that Trump is better on that side. So again, to me, it's really clear that he's the lesser of two evils. But again, the main point today is that it's not just about Trump versus Kamala. And I think that and I think this is even more to your point than Father. I think that this is going to show even clearer that even if you are just sure you can't vote for Trump, okay, fine. Still go and vote. Vote for these other things. We're going to show you really clearly. Eric's got some of it. This all came up, actually, this whole idea for me waking up at 4:00 to have a podcast was that I was going to vote. So I can do it in electronic voting here in Germany for Colorado. I was looking through the voting, the sample or whatever. And I was like, hey, I actually don't know a lot of this stuff. So I texted Eric. I was like, hey, Eric, what do you think about this, this, and this?
That was your first mistake. Yeah.
No, but when you and I got into a great conversation, and it's just kind of like, kind of going back and forth. It's like, okay, well, what do you think about the imprisonment of people? We'll talk about these, a bit later, but there's some really nuanced things to vote for. And there's some things that in this podcast, I don't think we're gonna have a clear answer for everything. I mean, some things are really clear, abortion, et cetera, but there's some big things like school choice. And I just saw someone else, Julia, said earlier, that's the same case in Arkansas. So it's also voting for school choice. That's a really big deal. We'll talk again in a minute about that. Mm-hmm. And it just shows again that everyone, please don't just get into your heads. You're only voting Trump or Kamala. There's a lot of other things to vote for. But Dad, I think we want to talk. I think I'll send it over to you now. And we want to talk a bit about the difference between republic and democracy, and also a bit about a recent poll we had on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was actually looking at my own state, Iowa, to see what the ballot initiatives were here, and I can't find them. I don't think we actually have any, because I believe Iowa is set up more as a pure republic. So you basically you're electing representatives who do all of your voting for you. The initiative propositions, that whole architecture is something that I think is a little bit more close to pure democracy, where we're not electing leaders to vote for us. We're actually doing direct voting. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of it. But I think that the one thing I really wanted to point out here is that whenever we start talking republic, democracy, you're going to have people come in and start to talk about monarchy, and monarchy being another, valid form of government. And I think it's important to note, and Father, correct me if I'm wrong here, the church has never said that one form is better or worse than another. The issue with it is that every form of government in its best state is oriented, its magnetic north is the social reign of Christ the King. And that's what we should be oriented towards. Obviously, in our country, we're not, and never really have been. But I think that even though, for me, as we start to talk about these a true democracy, which is basically these ballot initiatives, in theory, with the internet and with all that, we could theoretically become a pure democracy and put everything for a vote and not even have representatives, because we've got the internet to do it. I think that would be a terrible idea. I think it takes the weaknesses of democracy and just puts them right out front and center. But my point here being that if you want to have the argument of monarchy versus republic versus democracy, that's fine. I know the monarchists like to say that monarchy has a better historical track record than the others. Yeah, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I suppose probably does. But that doesn't mean that just because you live in a representative form of government that you should, or popular form of government, you shouldn't engage because you would rather it be a monarchy, right? And I think that's one of the cases that I want to make sure to make, is that God put all of us here into a populist form of government, whether it's representative or democracy. And because of that, and because we live within the church, it's incumbent on us to be involved. And so I think that just kind of reiterates what Father's saying. And Kevin, if you want to go ahead and put that poll up that we ran yesterday.
I didn't. Yeah. Let me see. I don't think I got that loaded.
We put out a poll asking people if they wanted. It basically, okay, gave them 4 options: Trump, Kamala, voting for neither, or not voting. And I think that
we got a pretty good participation, I think.
Yeah, we had 300 and some. We had quite a few people vote.
All right, I got it in just a sec.
Okay, so anyways, we got Trump. Trump got about what you would have expected. So yes, at 300 votes, 66% for Trump, and about like you expect, 1% for Kamala. I'm not sure if that's
That's
actually.
Yeah,
we a couple of the previous podcasts.
Knuckleheads.
Yeah, whatever you want to call them. But I wanted to kind of call out the 7% here, the neither but not but voting, and say that in the spirit of what we're trying to talk about tonight, I have great respect. Now, I don't agree. I will probably do another podcast. Kevin and I are kind of planning another podcast right now on the case for Trump. And I'm not a Trump worshiper, but I'm a Trump guy. And I believe that Trump is the answer, to this election. But for those who are still voting, but not voting for either candidate, I have high respect. And I think that I admire the fact that at least you're getting out and you're being involved and you're taking that duty seriously. The 25% or 26% who are not voting, guys, we need to work. We need to talk. This is kind of what this is for, is regardless of what, go out and vote for sheriff, go out and vote for judges, go out and vote for ballot initiatives. Just get out there and participate.
Well, someone says here, how will the monarchy be ushered in if you're serving 2 masters? Sometimes standing for what you believe in means standing alone. Guys, let's live in the real world here. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be mean, but that's not reality. There's no monarchy. If you want to believe in a monarchy in the U.S., it's going to come after an atomic bomb or something. Maybe it's not even that. There's no reality. It's not going to happen anytime soon. Sorry, I mean, it's so let's live in the real life. We do it, as Father said earlier. It was we have to do, if we have the right to vote, we need to do it.
I would say the church is practical and recognizes the differences in the times we live in, the places, and what we can do, what we're morally obligated to do in certain circumstances. And if we were not supposed to take part in our government, then we wouldn't have these Catholic books that talk about voting and taking part in our civic duties in the country in which we are in, that were written and approved by the church in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s. If we were supposed to just sit on our hands and wait for the monarchy to be ushered in, as you said, then there would not be anything written in these moral theology books about a moral obligation to vote under pain of sin. It talks about it being a mortal sin if there is a good candidate and you vote for the bad. It talks about, probably just a venial sin or whatever if you could affect things and you don't. Again, I understand the argument that, it doesn't matter, vote doesn't matter, whatever. I get that. And in some circumstances, it's probably true. But the situation we live in the world today, it is just not where we are. And the church didn't say under the great popes, Pope Pius XII, Pope Pius XI, Pope Pius X, Pope Pius IX, Leo XIII, etc., did not say, do not get involved in your government because you need to wait for a miracle to happen to install the monarchy. That's just not the Catholic way of thinking. That's not what the books say. So.
Yeah, and that's what we appreciate exactly having you on, Father. And it's exactly right. Someone else mentions that Pius XII said this as well, and I read several. I don't have him here, but he's very, very clear, and I think Pius XI as well. Several of the last true popes are extremely clear. Father's smiling. Father probably does have it next.
I'm just having a hard time keeping a straight face with some of the comments because I just literally read from a moral theology book that had the approbation of the church from moral theologians, and they're saying that that's a moral fault, and you can't do that. I'm sorry, that's just not Catholic. So
don't read comments, Father.
It doesn't agree with what I think. Yeah,
I'm done. Reading comments, that way lies madness. Yeah.
In reading well, most of the comments I think are as I'm reading them too. I think most of them are very very clear. But I think guys, I think the clear thing is let's listen to Father. I mean, first of all, the church the church is extremely clear about the importance of being part of our of being part of the civil society. It's just not even a question. So let's not argue that. And I think again, let's live in the real world. We don't live in a monarchy, and it's not going to be a monarchy, guys. Guys, I love monarchy. I mean,
maybe
look,
someday.
I live in Germany. I love the old. I have buddies who have flags of the Roman. The Holy Roman Empire in their room. They hang it in their room. They walk around. They talk about the Holy Roman Empire.
I have swords hanging up on my wall. I have, St. Michael with the shield and coat of arms, and I have, crusaders and knights and all that stuff all over the place. I love it, but until that time,
right? Yeah, and so we can talk about that. We can have a chivalrous mentality and be old fashioned and traditional and love the monarchy too. I like the idea of a monarchy. But as Fran mentioned earlier too, we'll look at England. England also had a monarch who led the entire country now for 500 years away from Catholicism. So this idea of this is this romanticism of it'd be so perfect if we had if we had King Louis come in, King St. Louis coming in and being king. Yeah, that would be fantastic. I think we would all be absolutely on board. It's not going to happen.
And I'll tell you,
government has to be. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dan.
Oh, no, I was just going to say real quick, what else would be ideal? If you think about this, or you're trying to romanticize it, go back 100 years. Okay, 30%, roughly 30% to 40% of Christians vote in every election, all right? We've got something like only 60% are even registered to vote. Go back 100 years and imagine that 90% voted for every election for 100 years, okay? We would have the social reign of Christ the King built into our Constitution by now. We would have had a constitutional amendment to do that if 90% of Christians voted. And so I think that, it's to a large degree, the mess that we're in today, to a large degree, is because Christians have not voted over the course of the last decades.
Yeah, and I guess I hope, with these podcasts and with conversations and people like Father Geckle being able to tell the importance of it from the church's point of view. I think that's such a goal of this channel. I think people probably get a little sick of you're just talking politics all the time, and it's true, and I understand why people get sick of it. We are the Catholic Family Podcast, but first of all, we are a Catholic family who has a podcast. I know people always think that means we have to talk catechism every day. No, it's a Catholic family talking about important topics, which I think right now this is the most important thing. And I think, again, the main thing being that people do need to take part in it. Sorry, Father. Go ahead.
If we're talking about moral obligations and what the church teaches, it's all Catholic.
Right.
It's what the Catholic says about politics. So, yeah.
Right. No, absolutely. Yeah. So, do we have any more comments on that, or do we want to get into the nitty gritty? Anybody?
Let's carry on.
Carry on. All right, then, Eric, I think the best place to start, I think we can start in Colorado. And again, everyone who's in the comments, thank you all for being here. First of all, it'd be interesting to know where you all are from, but maybe don't tell us unless you have a comment, because we might get the important proposition comments lost. There was one earlier.
Yep, I saved it.
You saved it? Okay, thanks, Eric. You want to bring that up?
Yeah, and I think the intent here was to respond to any questions that the commenters have, and just kind of fill in the rest with Colorado and Iowa, since that's what we have.
Exactly.
But the one
I
was
didn't do enough research. Sorry.
Yeah, the one was from CTAB. Go ahead.
I was just going to say I think it's the second comment from the bottom. Actually, the very first one. I'm in Kentucky.
Oh, here we go. Yeah. Is that the one you're talking about? Oh, we can cover this one first. You had a different one, Eric?
Yeah,
okay, let's do this one, then we'll do the one you have, Eric. So this one, we mentioned it earlier. This is and I think this is an important one because it's also one of the ones in Colorado. Julia says, I'm in Kentucky. If you live here, vote yes for Amendment 2. It changes the Kentucky Constitution to give parents school choice, and it helps private schools receive vouchers. Eric, what exactly does that mean? What is the school choice? Because again, that is something that is in Colorado. Maybe it's in other states. Again, we're not, deep experts of these matters, but maybe it's other places as well. So what does that mean, Eric?
Yeah, well, we've talked before, right? One of the most important things I think to both of us is school choice, right? For as far as the future of the country, right? I mean, conservatives out reproduce liberals, and so the only chance they have is to convert our people, and that's using public schools in general. Yeah. So school choice, in as I consider it, and as I think it should be intended, is giving the parents the right to decide how to school their children, whether it be public schools, private schools, or homeschools. So Amendment 80 in Colorado, and it sounds like this. What was it? Amendment 2, Amendment 3 in
You said
Kentucky.
2, I think. Yeah.
2 in Kentucky, yeah.
The intent there is to add to the Constitution, the state Constitution, the right for parents to decide for their children to be homeschooled, right? Kind of enshrining that right. And most states, especially including in Colorado, right, we have the right to homeschool, but it's not in the Constitution, so it would be easy enough for someone to overturn, right? So I think that's one of the benefits.
But Colorado
of
has
adding
such
it
a
to the
great
Constitution.
governor right now. I mean, come on. Paul
Could be
is
worse.
such an upstanding, traditional.
Eric,
Yeah,
do the vouchers mean that you're going to actually get money to homeschool?
And I think that's yes, and I don't think that was in the Colorado. In fact, I know that wasn't in the Colorado specifically, but it sounds like in Kentucky. So yeah, instead of right when we pay our property taxes, almost all of that is going to the public school in the district we live in.
Right.
I think the intent here would be that you could get some of that money back for your homeschool or for your private school where you're sending your kids. So it's obviously something that like the teachers unions and the public school people are freaking out about, because just by definition, you're broadening that supply of different school options. You're going to shrink their dominion over the public school.
Well, and sorry, I'm going to bring it to Trump real quickly, but he's talked about totally ending the Department of Education, which I think everyone would agree. I mean, I shouldn't say everyone would agree, but I mean, to me, one of the biggest issues in the world is big government and globalized government. I mean, I'm in Europe, so the entire idea of people in Belgium or wherever deciding what happens in Germany and Greece and Italy, et cetera, is absurd. And I think that in my mind, hey, make this a more local issue. The states are the schools are being decided much more at a local. It just makes more sense. I mean, schools in Colorado, schools in Arkansas are just they're not the same. It doesn't make sense to try to control them from a federal level.
I worked in that industry for almost 20 years, public schools, and I can tell you that the federal money is a joke. All it does is transfer money from wealthier districts to less wealthy districts. That's all it does, and it creates some paperwork headaches. And so the loss of that it's going to put a burden on states to probably do some of that if they want to equalize between richer and poorer districts. But to get the feds out of it, I think is going to be a good thing, and you're going to get the teachers union less impactful by doing that, by getting the federal government out of it.
And Hop Shizzle says school choice also applies to being able to choose a different public school from the one to which you'd be assigned. Right. That's interesting too. Which obviously, if you have a public school that is got bad teachers who are teaching perverted subject or whatever, and that I guess that's an issue. I don't know if that's a school by school issue, state by state. I suppose actually I don't really know how that works. But I mean, speaking from my own experience too of how important this issue is, Germany, it is illegal to homeschool. So don't think that these things can't just go away. Yeah. So I mean that was started by Hitler. Thanks a lot to our great great Christian leader, former.
And I've heard a lot of comments on both the Colorado law and the Kentucky, where it's we already have the right to homeschool. It's like don't take that for granted, right? That is very easily that is very easily taken away, like it was in Germany. And so enshrining it in the Constitution of that state is, it could still be taken away, but it's much harder to do. So that's why I think it's definitely
there needs to be more of a mindset of let's work towards something better rather than that's just a status quo. And at least we're not as bad as the other people. Like if there can be any way to actively make things better, then we should. So any way that we can make public schools less of the norm and better education, vote it in.
And back to your Department of Education, Kevin, like I agree the DOE should be destroyed. I think Trump, hopefully he means it when he says he's going to do it. The cynic in me says, well, he had 4 years and a Republican Congress and Senate.
I was just astounded to hear anybody bring it up.
Yeah.
Right.
But,
yeah, that's a big thing to say. Even,
Step in the right direction, right, Father? Just to have politicians talking about that type of thing. 20 years ago, never would have happened.
No. Oh, no. You homeschool? Are you guys crazy or something?
Well, and that was something, but that was something that I think I saw obviously from afar. That happened during COVID, right? That homeschooling became didn't it quadruple in the amount of people homeschooling, or 10 times? I don't know, a huge increase because the parents started to see what the kids were being taught, because the kids had to be at home because they couldn't go into school, and the parents were actually there watching over their shoulders, like, okay, what is my purple haired transgender teacher teaching my kids? And I think it freaked people out. And I think so you had a huge increase in homeschooling because people are like, wait, what? This is what
schools
and that's why
Yeah.
we have these on the ballot now, is because of that increase, right? Without that COVID bump in homeschooling, we wouldn't even have these propositions on the ballot.
Yeah.
Make homeschooling normal again.
This is a good point from yeah, exactly. Colorado enshrined abortion in its constitution before it even broached the issue of enshrining school choice, and that is why Catholics need to vote. That's so true. And again, that's the whole issue here. That I think people, Catholics, I mean, I think a lot of good people just they get totally blinded by Trump versus Kamala. Trump versus Biden, Trump versus whoever, and you just think, okay, I don't want to have anything to do with that. And it's just this. I don't know, blinded, like, okay, I don't want, I'm just going to bury my head in the sand because I don't like it, which okay, we've all said we see where you're coming from on that side, but there's so much more to vote for. And I think several states have, again, abortion rights being enshrined.
Nebraska does. Yeah. I think Nebraska is trying to limit abortion. And also they've got legalized marijuana on the ballot too. So, I mean, if you're in Nebraska, look at those initiatives and go out and vote. I mean, because anybody who lived in Colorado or lives in Colorado can like we did, can tell you what happens to the moral, fortitude of a state that legalizes marijuana. It just goes out the window.
Yeah. Yeah. This whole discussion about voting on the issues, it's so good. It's interesting. So, when I first started having Mass in Little Rock, we had a couple different locations, but we had Mass in a funeral home for about a year and a half, and it worked out pretty well. Just down the road from there, it wasn't a very great area of the city, but just down the road from there was an abortion clinic, like one of the last in the state. There weren't very many in Arkansas. There are none today. And just very shortly before we moved out of that place where we were having Mass every Sunday, that abortion clinic closed down. And now I don't think there are any in Arkansas. And it's like, look at that versus Colorado or Washington or these other states where people let these things come into law. There is a difference. And which is better, which is worse,
And God will bless those states that do that.
Right.
And punish the ones that don't.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Sin only brings down more consequences, more and more consequences. So the less sin there is, especially such unnatural and such horrible sins, the more good there's going to be in society, more blessings from God. There is one here that touched on Arkansas, which was good. If we can bring that up from C-Tab.
Proceeds? Yep. That's
Yes.
the one
I'd actually like to hear some of y'all's take on this.
Kevin, do you want me to read it, or do you think
which one is it again? Sorry.
It's from C-Tab. It's about halfway down.
2015-06.
I know who that is. But...
Timestamp.
Go ahead and start reading it. I'll see if I can put it up on the screen.
All right. Let's see. In Arkansas, we are voting to add lottery proceeds to the funding of scholarships and grants for VOTech and tech schools. Oh, vocational tech and tech schools. Lottery funds currently fund public schools. What do y'all think? I like
Very
the
good
y'all.
question. Bad idea,
That's
guys.
Arkansas.
It's a bad idea, because what happens is the schools get dependent on it, and they cut regular funding, and so what happens is the schools really don't do they don't keep up their funding. So what happens is when you have a downed economy and people aren't buying lottery tickets, your schools really suffer, and so you end up with more highs and lows in their funding. Personally, I mean, this is just my personal opinion. I always thought that the way Colorado did their lottery funding originally, which was to give it all to parks and to beautifying the state, was the optimal, perfect use of lottery funds. That's just personally, but yeah, in states when they've used it for schooling, it's not really gone well.
Just in general, that's kind of you get this new influx of money. What are you going to do? You're going to spend it on probably things you don't need. You're going to be less conservative with your budget, all that. And then, like you say, that dries up, or now the state lottery has control in some way over those schools, right? I mean, this is kind of a microcosm of the issue with the Department of Education, Department of Education is constantly funneling money into all these districts, all these states. They become dependent on it. And so then in effect, what you're doing is the Department of Education is just king of everything, right? Oh, you don't like this thing that we're pushing, this agenda? Sorry, you don't get funding. And
Right.
yeah, so it's
They
just
don't
that
need more
dependency.
money. That's not the problem, I would think.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
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 Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, I see. Oh, sorry. Go
that
ahead,
was
Father.
no that was my initial take when I saw that about the casinos and stuff. I'm not a fan of that and what it brings in and what it encourages.
Mhm.
It usually doesn't bring about good effects from it.
This
And I
one's
just see this
interesting,
one.
Kevin.
This
Yeah,
one I
having
see
no
too.
abortion.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's very clear on this, but I guess my point is that I see in Europe things are going actually in the right direction. So it's very split. You have extremes. You really have people going extreme left and extreme right, all over Europe, and in Austria they just had elections that went to a populist right government. Germany is going continuously more right and populist, and in a good way, I think. I mean, it's slow. It's a long process, but my point being, even the most in Germany, in Germany is filled with people who hate themselves. They hate their past. It's a really kind of a depressed country, which is really sad. But the younger generations, that Gen Z, even the millennials, are actually changing. They're moving in a direction where it's like, hey, we're done with that. We want something new. We want to be proud. We want to be traditional. You also have people who are tree hugger crazies. That's true. But I guess the point is, if that can happen in Germany, I think it can happen in California. I mean,
Yeah.
again, I understand the idea of, okay, nothing it doesn't matter, nothing's going to change. I think California is going to be a lot closer to red than people think. Now, it's not going to go
California has-
red. It's going to
you
be
see
interesting.
there's a lot of anecdotal evidence in California. I'm not sure if San Anthony Padua, if you see this out there, maybe we see it from afar, but man, you get these you had Trump rally in Coachella where he had like over 100,000 people. You get these boat parades. You get you get people on the beach in Huntington Beach. And I mean, you get these extraordinary. Now, granted, a lot of that's just because there's so many people there, but Kern County is very conservative, and you get a lot. I mean, probably a lot of the state is conservative outside of San Francisco and in Los Angeles. But then you got to wonder, at what point do you finally bottom out and people finally say we've had enough? I mean, I'm seeing that right now in New York. And I believe that New York could actually go red. I mean, they're within. I think Trump's within 10 points, but you've got a major grassroots groundswell of support away from the establishment, away from the Democrats, away from the plantation, and towards sanity
Well,
again.
And I think you see it too. You see it with Hollywood, and I think
Mhm.
Hollywood is failing. Like they are going totally into the dumps. They are losing all their money. None of the movies work. Their agendas didn't work. You can see that in the look at Disney. I mean, like they are actually losing billions per year.
Who would have
now.
thought that?
It's failing? I know, and so it's like,
Right.
hey guys, we're actually. I mean, we may be close to civil war or something too. I think that's another topic. I mean, I think it could, because it is very split into. You just still have plenty of crazies. But I think people at least are stopping giving their money to these agendas, and that's something. I mean, if people stop watching movies from California, or you see these, this team that has what is it? I forget where they're from, maybe Arizona or something, that has this transgender volleyball player, and it's kind of a big deal right now because all the teams are just forfeiting and saying, no, we're not gonna play this dude. And I think that's a pretty big deal, because now it's normal. It's like here in Germany, the AfD, so the formerly Nazi party, is now, it's too big. The media can't call them the Nazi party anymore. They can't, because too many people. It's like a third of the people in Germany now are voting for him. So it's becoming normalized to be more right, more traditional. Which is
if
awesome.
things are bad enough, things will change. If things are bad enough, things will change. I had mentioned this in a sermon 2 weeks ago or whatever. The whole Roman Empire thing, it's a meme now, right? The guys always think about Roman Empire or whatever.
Right,
And I'm guilty. I always bring it up, especially when we're talking about these kind of things, because it's like, who would have thought, in 90 AD that Rome would become the center of Christendom, while the Christians were getting thrown to animals and gladiators were killing each other for entertainment and all of these other things, all these pagan gods were being worshipped. Like it changed, things can change, and it didn't happen. Yeah, they didn't have voting. But I can tell you it didn't change by people saying, oh, this is so evil. We're not going to do anything to help our neighbor or do anything to pray for our government or do any positive good to help. Like that's not how they went about it.
Well,
they did what they could.
Saint Sebastian is a saint, right? And he was one of the key members of the
Praetorian Guard, I believe.
he was a huge high level soldier under Diocletian, right? And so I think and obviously he always remained moral and was killed for his faith and his morality, but he was still a soldier under Diocletian. I mean, I think again you got to look at the past, that they still were members of society and did things. What was the Saint Maurice and his the Theban Legion, that all were killed for it.
Yeah.
They were also
10,
part of the Roman army. Yeah, the entire legion was killed for their faith, but they were still part of the Roman army. So I think that, and I think Eric was smiling at this one. Do we want to go into a whole?
Peter,
we're going to talk about that.
Unfortunately, it's not on the ballot.
You don't want to know. Exactly.
If only it were on the ballot.
That's a fella that likes to bring up tons of questions for me.
Yeah.
Great guy. Yeah.
I mean, we can discuss if you want. I'm not.
I mean, I think
in our country. Yeah.
We thought about doing a yes/no on this, by the way, and can't find anybody to take the
no. Yeah, exactly. Like, should we talk about women voting?
It was actually interesting. I listened to Tim Pool's take on this. I found that very interesting because he I don't know if you're familiar with it, but he basically said, before women had the right to vote, correct me if I'm wrong, but he was saying before women had the right to vote, it was understood men can vote because they're going to go die if they get to vote on whether they go to war or not, because they're the one that are going to be going to war. So he was kind of bringing up the opinion that if women are going to vote, there should be some kind of skin in the game, right? So that you don't have a bunch of liberal women that can, drink lattes all day and do nothing, don't have children, don't care about contributing anything, and saying, yeah, we should go save Ukraine.
Yeah, exactly.
Now that's just a take on it, and I get that argument, but we are where we are. And,
we
need all of our Catholic ladies to vote. Please do.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Well, and I mean, more of my take is who should vote. I mean, I don't think it's not all men either. I don't think that's. I like how back in the day it was landowning men who. And okay, you also did the blacks couldn't vote. So there are issues with what our founding fathers had, obviously, but a lot of them were fixed. But there was some sense to it. It was like, okay, it was people who had skin in the game, who are obviously mature enough to own property. Now you have an 18-year-old man or woman that are morons who they've never done anything in their life, that they've never worked a job, and they can already vote and determine who's going to be the president of the United States. I mean, it's pretty ridiculous.
And probably what's happening is an activist is putting a ballot in front of their face and saying, "Here, sign this and vote the way I vote for you." And they're not even voting. They're not going to a voting booth or anything like that. So I mean, the system's pretty well broken as it is.
But right, and so I think we'd all agree though the system is that women can vote, so women should vote. I think we all agree with that. Now, if it was a proposition, that would be an interesting.
Not even a proposition in the current society, but a proposition of that you're the founding fathers founding your own country. It would be an interesting discussion to have. Yeah.
You know what? Yeah. That's. Yeah, if we had a different society, things would be different, but it isn't what it is now.
Exactly.
But I like that.
Really good question with RFKs. If you look at Joshua, look around down a little bit.
I saw that earlier. Yeah.
Really good question here.
Hey, Josh. Anyway,
Eric knows Josh. It's good to see. It's good. I see a lot of Colorado people here, I think.
Yeah.
I know, or at least some Colorado people. Go ahead, Dad. You can read it if you want.
Let me read it off while you're getting up. Yeah. With RFK's endorsement of Donald Trump and Project Make America Healthy Again is also huge for America. And I think this is something we've talked about a lot, is that of all the different maladies, of all the different problems facing our country, the quality of our food, of our water, of our air is really almost as important as anything we've got going on. And if you've watched any of RFK's any of the videos that he's put out, he really gets it. I mean, he talks about some of some of the chemicals that we've allowed, that like in Germany you don't even allow. I can't remember the names of
Oh,
them.
half the things.
Yeah,
It's half the things that Americans eat are illegal in Germany or in Europe. It's insane.
And he's telling the story of one of them that was used as a road base. It was a road base, and they were looking for another use for it, and they started putting it into food as a dye, as a yellow dye, just to make stuff slightly more yellow. And it's toxic. It's poisonous. And tartrazine is what I think it's called, tartrazine. But anyways, I think to have his influence in there and have him in a position of authority where he's able to actually go out and help make America healthy, I think that is absolutely huge. I totally agree with Joshua there.
And I think RFK is a loon. I think he's a nut.
Well,
Actually, the more I got to look into him and listen to him, I think he's kind of nuts. But I totally
very libertarian,
he's
extremely
libertarian.
Well,
and he's weird. Some of his past stories are very strange. I mean,
did you hear the one about cutting off the head of the whale?
The head of the whale, or the was it the bear that he hit with his car?
Yeah, he hit a bear.
No,
he found
no
a dead
way.
Bear in the park
This dude did some weird stuff and is lying about it now, which I guess I understand why he would lie about it now.
He's a kook, but I think the point is, like,
his health
Trump can actually
awesome.
Coalesce these people, right?
Yeah,
for better, for worse, and I think in general it's for better to actually have that diversity of opinion as opposed to thou shalt.
Wait, are you saying that it would be better for people if they didn't have companies that were incentivized to get people sick, so they'd be unhealthy and then have to be dependent on a multi-billionaire business about getting people addicted to medication?
That were formerly tobacco companies. Did you guys see that one, the interview with Tucker Carlson, the Kaylee, I forget their names, but wild. I mean, that's one of the best interviews I've ever seen, and totally nuts. And they talk about it. The biggest companies that turned into like Monsanto and these other food production companies were tobacco companies. They were shut down in the 1970s, I guess that was, or 80s. And they just like, what else can we, get rich on by addicting people to things? And it was a food industry, which is bonkers.
Oh, David Rockefeller and Big Pharma and all that. Yeah, I mean, I think they're going to really go after all of that culture. And I mean, they're taking, I'll tell you what, okay, big media is nasty, big banks are nasty, big politics. I mean, you got all these different bigs that are out there. There is no industry out there, in my opinion, that is meaner, nastier, and more horrible than big pharmaceuticals. They literally kill naturopaths who start to find out the truth about what they're doing. I mean, they're nasty, and they're going to be a hard group to get rid of.
Well, that was the thing, that
pretty bad too.
What's that?
Boeing, the company.
Boeing. Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, big war. Yeah. Exactly. War for profit. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and hey, let's just skirt around actually making good airplanes. Let's just be cheap. And
there's a good question here. It's kind of broad. It's not too specific, but should there be a separation?
I just saw that. Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah. That's probably best for Father.
Yeah, simple answer is no. The state is supposed to be subservient to the church. Obviously, it's not enshrined in our country, in our Constitution. But yeah, there's this will get me going. I won't get going on this one, but this is one that really riles me up, because like you look at the ideal of what it should be. I mean, look at the problem we have in our country with our politicians and such. They get into power, they have political power, and then if they rig the system or control the system, or people are just yes man for them, there's no way to correct things. When you have the church there, which just as heaven is above the earth and the soul is more important than the body, the work of the church is much more important than the work of the state. And the state is required to recognize the rights of the church, which is the only institution instituted by Christ here on this earth. So yeah, I mean, you read about how in the past, when you had the church and state in its proper order, this king is waging an unjust war. He's doing this. Okay, we're going to threaten the country with interdict, meaning we're going to close interdict. I think that's right. Yeah, we're going to close all the churches and nobody can go to mass, and see what pressure 10 million peasants or 10 million of the common folk who can't perform their religious observances, what kind of pressure that'll put on the monarch. they or excommunication or other things where you are excommunicated from the church because of these crimes, so therefore your people are not bound to obey you or some sort. Like, the church was there to help. So yeah, the church and state is not supposed to be separated. That is not proper. That is not right at all. But that's where we are
what
today.
you see today.
Mhm.
Yeah, go ahead, Father. Sorry.
I just wanted to add on to that, is like, people, we do live in an imperfect world. We live in a country where the setup is imperfect. It's Freemasonic principles in origin, and that is an evil. And I spoke to someone online about this last week. It's like, yeah, that is wrong. But you remember, God brings good out of evil. And notice that in our country, I think we could argue that we have the most traditional masses, true masses in the world. In our country, the church is really thriving in our country. It's growing in leaps and bounds. And that's in this country. God brings good out of evil. The things that, at least for now, until things change, the practice of our religion is not infringed. We can practice our religion. Now, somebody commented they put traditional Catholics on the FBI list to watch out, etc. Well, obviously, we know that, but at least to this point, we priests can still drive around everywhere we need to go to give the sacraments, give the mass, and the church is growing. And that's one of the things that's come out of this, Freemasonic principles. And that's, God can take the devil's work, throw it back in his face as oh yeah, you tried, nice try, but I'm still going to lead these people to heaven and my church is still going to grow in spite of everything you do. So anyway,
and
go ahead,
it's a
Eric.
good argument for loving the United States, loving our country, even though it is so bad. There's a certain level of by your fruits you shall know them, right? The fruits, like you were saying, especially of the traditional faith, the resurgence of the traditional faith is so much more pronounced here than it is anywhere else in the world. There's got to be something. That's got to be a reward for something done right in America, right? And you read like Pope Pius XII, when he came here, he would not stop praising the American people and how much he loved America and everything. And it just makes you proud to see, even though, yes, we are founded on these Freemasonic principles, the good that's come out of that.
So was the Roman Empire.
Yeah. And it's
not Freemasonic principles, but pagan principles.
I think it's actually,
Sorry,
it's enough. It's a topic for an entire podcast, I think, because I mean, it's interesting having now lived in Germany for 8 years, how to see why is it that there are more traditionalists in the U.S. And I think you could talk a lot about it. It's something we talk a lot about here, obviously, because we have quite a few Americans who've joined the parishes over here, and I think it has a lot to do with the societal pressure and how the Novus Ordo Church is actually a lot more enshrined in society here. It's in actually kind of more in a traditional way here in Bavaria, at least, and I think that's pretty interesting. But I think Americans were, I don't know, maybe just more rebellious, more willing to be
some
like,
of that,
hey,
for sure.
No, this we're gonna do what we think is right, rather than what the church is telling us.
The weak and the foolish to confound the strong. The weak things of the world, God has chosen.
All right, so let's keep moving on. I haven't seen any here in a bit.
This is interesting from Julia. She said, just make sure the Catholic Church is united as the state and not the Church of England. I think that there's an interesting point there, separation of church and state. I think that it's, Father, everything right, obviously. The one caveat, I think, though, is that isn't it true, Father, that we don't really want to have leaders who have both church and state power in the same person? We saw a lot of that during the Middle Ages, and it didn't go well.
They're separate institutions,
Right.
The one is subservient to the other. But yeah, England, King Henry VIII, head of the Church of England. I mean, it still is today. The king or queen of the realm is the head of the church, and and
they're lizard people. So
right.
All right.
And that would be every Muslim country too. Well, I think to some degree, Sharia law, and you have I'm not exactly sure how that works over there for the rulers and stuff.
As with most things, the truth is in the middle, right? We have separation of church and state is obviously wrong, but also you have Christ saying, "Render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's," which denotes some separation there.
Of course,
right? You don't.
Yeah,
you don't want
I mean, the church was always upholding the rights of the state over its citizens. It's not like the church was saying, "Oh yeah, you just listen to us and don't pay your taxes and don't listen to your lawful authority." Of course not. The
Right.
church has always taught you have to obey lawful authority. You have these civic duties, etc. So the church protected the state as well from breaking its laws, etc. And the best kind of citizens you could have are ones that are brought up by the church to respect all authority is coming from God. So it's not like the church was warring against the state. I mean, the state often warred against the church, but
yeah, it's interesting when you read history and you see like St. Thomas Becket is obviously one of the greatest examples of that, and how the state was trying to take over that the ability of the bishops to judge their own priests, etc. And they're trying to say, trying to take over, any pretty much any legal authority of the church, and
right,
obviously St. Thomas Becket. And so he put in
temporal
St. Thomas
power, yeah.
Becket as the archbishop, and hoping that would be
Mhm.
like, okay, got my buddy in there, so we're going to change all the laws. We're going to make it so the church doesn't have much, much control here. And of course, St. Thomas Becket was filled with grace and eventually became a martyr, which is really fascinating part of British history. I want to say, everyone, we have about 100 people watching. Thank you
Nice.
all. It's awesome. Please like and yeah, you guys are commenting. You're doing a great job, but please like it and share. I think this is a really important podcast because, again, like we stated at the beginning, the entire idea of talking about these things is to make it so people understand how important it is to go and vote this year. Again, even if you hate Donald Trump, you can't vote for Trump. That's a whole nother topic. We're going to cover that again. I think Dad's going to do. We're going to do something here in the next few days. But fine, a whole different topic. But please go and vote for other things that are down ballot, which
I
are
always like to tell a story.
maybe more important.
I like to tell a story, and this is California again. If St. Anthony's still on, and there was a
St. Anthony?
there was a group of Protestants out in California that decided they would all run for school board, and they did. They all ran for school board, and they won, and they took over the school board, and now they're basically forming this school district in their image. Now, granted, it's not exactly the same as Catholic image, but if they can do that, then I mean, there's still hope, and there's got to be things. Now we don't have those kind of numbers, obviously, not in any one location, but we still have the ability to go out and make a difference.
Mm-hmm. Make things better. Yeah.
Yep. The biggest problem and the biggest enemy is our own laziness and our own indifference, or whatever you want to call it when you say
despair.
It doesn't matter.
Despair.
That's
I think
the word.
I think that's a really big problem. I mean, to be honest with you, a couple of years ago, I was in the same mindset. Just the information, just looking at it was just like, what's the point? Both sides are the same, two sides of one coin, and definitely gone through a change of viewpoint on many things. But yeah, it's discouraging, but at the same time, if we can improve things just a little bit, make things a little bit better for the next generation, if parents do their job of raising Catholic families, and if we do the best we can as priests, the teachers and the schools and everything, if we all do the best we can to live our faith as best as we possibly can, that itself is going to have a huge impact, and things can change. And giving up and saying, the world's going to end anyway, so don't even try. Yeah, nobody knows that. If Christ said not even the angels of heaven know when that day is going to be, then don't count on that coming. And using that as an excuse for we don't need to do anything because the world's going to end anyway.
Well, and you just see these example like in the 1970s. You even hear it in some sermons. You can kind of tell I think they really thought, okay, after Vatican II, this really is, at least the beginning of the end. You see that even I think with samurai priests. There's like, hey, this is guys prepare for the end times. But just imagine,
could be.
Yeah, but just imagine though if the samurai, so they're saying that. Imagine if they just thought if they had acted on that. If they said, yeah, okay, so we're gonna bunker down. We're not gonna do anything. We're not gonna try to grow. We're just gonna try to bunker down, save our souls as the world ends. No. That's not what they did. They went and they started schools all around the U.S. and look at the fruits of that 50 years later. Thank goodness they didn't just bury their head in the sand and say, "Oh, the world's end." They didn't do that.
And look
they
at history.
It was ending, but they still worked towards the future, and that's something I think we have to keep that mentality in mind, because who knows? Maybe it's tomorrow, but maybe it's 1,000 years. We don't know.
St. Paul thought it was the end times, right? And during the Arian heresy, where you have the vast majority of the church also defecting, they probably thought it was the end times. It just goes over and over and over again. You can't count on it.
Yeah, and the question
We're not
I
that
like,
special.
no, and the question I like to ask, guys, just at the very basic level, we are soldiers of Christ. Okay, do we really want, as soldiers, do we really want to stand before God with our hands clean? And then we didn't fight, and we sat back, and we let the world pass us by. No, we're soldiers. We fight. That's what we do.
Yeah, yeah. And
But
again,
I don't have time because I've got podcasts to listen to and blogs to read, so I can't get out there and research.
Right.
Yeah, no, I mean, even if we do what we can and it doesn't change anything, well, at least we have the credit for trying, the merit for trying,
Right.
and working at it. I wanted to mention, just be careful. I want to say, I'm anybody that has a brain knows this already, but just look into the wording and what's actually behind some of these propositions and stuff. The last time we had elections here, somebody thankfully pointed this out. There was one proposition about freedom of religion. And it was saying, this is just to enshrine. The wording of it started out like, this is just to enshrine that all churches, religions have the right to operate freely. And we're like, okay, good. We're thinking like the lockdowns and stuff. We're like, okay, yeah, we want this, make sure that they're not going to close us down. And the first half of it was talking about all this good stuff about how it's going to protect this right. And then the end of it was, but in times of whatever else, the state can close down the churches for XYZ reason. And it was like the majority of people voted for that to pass, and it did. I think it did. But because you read the first part or you read the heading, and it seems good, but then you get into the details, and it really isn't. And to your point earlier, one of you made the point earlier, is like how many decades of just really bad legislation has been passed because nobody cared to look into it.
Well, and I think that's something that I highly recommend that people out there get together, have a men's meeting, or they didn't, again, women vote too, but I guess I always kind of assume that the men, the household, talk with their wives, and but okay, what about the single ladies? So it's a good point, and I mean, it's probably something that maybe someone, some of the leaders of each of the parishes need to get together, say, hey, we're going to have a meeting, and I'm sure it's best if you can do it with the priest and talk these things through. I think that's a really great idea, so that you're not just going into it alone. I mean, I did that with Eric. Again, I'm reading through some of these things, like, whew, these are, and part of it was like the judges, like, should you vote this judge in or not? I'm like, I don't really know. Eric, do you know what to do with these judges? And I'll have to do my own research, obviously, but I think being able to bounce these things off of other people, I think that's the best way. That helps you to understand the language. Maybe there's something that is exactly as Father just said. Maybe there's something that if you read through it quickly, you're like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, freedom,
and
good,
really,
click, but you gotta be
at a
careful.
very practical level, you can probably go out if you're in Colorado. You just go to Google and say Colorado Christian Voters Guide or something like that, and see if you can find something written by somebody, because usually you can find somebody who is relatively like-minded, who's gone through and tried to sift these things, so you don't have to be a legal scholar.
Yeah, to at least get started, right?
Yeah, right. Make your own decisions, but at least use it as a guide. Yeah.
Right.
The price of a well-functioning society is diligence, right? And it's hard to read through, and it's hard to search all those judges. On the judges question, Kevin, like in general, I search each of their names, see if they, were involved in any high-profile cases on the right side of a thing. But in general, I go with the advice I got from my grandfather: vote them all out.
Nice. If in doubt, vote them out. Yeah, that's
if they get if they get too comfortable in their position. Yeah.
Well, and I think, I guess it shows again, if you're just looking at these at the voting ballot, it is pretty confusing. And so I think it really is a good thing, especially for young people. I just
purposefully so.
Yeah, and I mean, I've been around the block a little bit now. I mean, I'm 35. I've lived a little. I've voted, but it's still looking at it's kind of like, ooh, okay, this is pretty tough. I need to talk to somebody about it. So, what about an 18-year-old? Well, what about someone who does want to, fulfill their civic duty, who's 18, 19, 20, and is going and voting? And I remember when I did that, I guarantee you. Well, I think I voted when I was 18. I think I voted for Bush, and I guarantee you, I was looking at the ballot like, I don't know. No. I don't know. I honestly don't remember the first time I voted.
First time I voted,
Bush.
I didn't know. I didn't
Yeah.
know there was anything other than the presidents to vote for.
Yeah.
That's how ignorant I was.
But sure,
So,
but because you've never done it, right? I mean, it's not things you really talk about, and I think that's part of the problem. I mean, maybe we're
And
just not
that's a
learning enough
huge
about.
problem because even
Yeah.
us, you can see our conversation always devolves back into Kamala versus Trump. And
Yeah.
arguably, that's one of the least important things that we'll all be voting for, right?
yeah,
The school
right,
choice thing or
right.
the anti-abortion thing. That's so much more important in the long run
Local,
than who's president for the next 4 years.
right, for sure. I live in a world where we know about what's going on everywhere around the world, all the good, the bad, the ugly. Most of it's ugly, and it keeps us thinking about what's going on somewhere we can't control anything or do anything to help it. And so it's very likely to lead to despair and discouragement, and don't even try. But I think that keeps us from being more involved locally. And so that's you build a house from a foundation up, and smaller into bigger, and that's like, for example, in Arkansas, I don't know if this is the case in most states, but in Arkansas, it's very Protestant, Baptist, Church of Christ, etc. But there's also a Masonic lodge in every single small town you go through, even the tiny little towns, and they've been there forever. And there's certain places where, like, you got to be part of the lodge, to for your business to go well, etc. So they had that tactic, get everybody involved in the lodge, get everybody involved. We're going to have a good time. We're going to help each other out and get involved locally. And so is there any surprise that we had the last couple decades of so much moral degradation and things, the Freemasonic principles? Yeah, you have the foundation of the country, but you also have all of these people on the ground in their local environment affecting things. So it's a good tactic. It's a good tactic, and we should follow suit.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think we're all it's so easy to talk online, to have comments on Twitter and Facebook, and how bad everything is. And I think we all agree how bad everything is. I mean, I think that's we all get it. We all understand that the country was founded on Masonic principles. Okay, yeah. But again, as we talked about, there are good fruits, and it's still the country that, okay, I don't live in, but I mean, patriotism is a virtue. It is a good thing to love your country, and that doesn't mean you love the leaders of your country. You don't love necessarily the laws of your country, but you want to fight for the place where you're from. And I think that the point is, if you don't do that, right, if you don't do it, who's going to do it, right? If you're not fighting for it, then okay, yeah, then just fall in the hole and die. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think it's a really dangerous mindset, and I think I'm sorry, it's a distinctly unmanly one too. I think that your idea of fighting. I'm sorry, it's just this idea like, okay, it's so bad, I'm just not going to do anything. Really? That really? And so that's why, again, I think we need. I'm sure we all see it. The lack of testosterone in our world. I think it's starting to get better, but the lack of manly men, and I think we really need to see older men, 30 and older, maybe 40 and older, taking younger men under their wings and saying, hey, let's go and vote. Let's go and have a beer if they're 21 and over, guys. And let's, talk. I know. I had to throw it out there for YouTube purposes.
Never stop me.
Go and, yeah, right. Exactly. Well, but let's go and talk about, what's on the ballot. And I mean, or get together as a men's group. And in men's groups, I think it's a great idea outside of voting. I think and I know Denver, you guys have one. I think, Father has one. I think Omaha has one. We have one here. And it's so rewarding, even though half the time we're arguing about stupid little things, but you still leave feeling like, hey, okay, but what we're arguing about are these really nitty-gritty philosophical details rather than abortion or whatnot. I think it's a nice thing that you leave like, okay, okay, we agree on pretty much everything. We're fighting about the stupid little things of if women should wear veils or not, that should women vote type of a thing. But I highly suggest anyone who's out there, again, try to start one in your parish if you can. If you're maybe if you're 20, you maybe wait a little bit till you have a little bit under your belt, but yeah, go start a men's group, because I think we need to be more militant, and I think that would be a good start.
On that score, it's kind of the way I see it in historical, looking at it kind of big picture. We see this. Wow. Nice comment. just kind of human nature. We're made of body and soul, and what affects one affects the other. And with Vatican II coming along, and the loss of faith, and the destruction of the Mass, and uh, you, people were deprived of the sacraments. They were deprived of grace and the light that comes from the faith. And then we see so much of this increase of the attack on the body. Then all the big pharma and then education. Mentally, the people are just dumbed down, not being taught as much. So you see an attack on the soul, first of all, because you need to rob people of God's grace, weaken their will, darken their intellect, so that they can be won over by all of this nonsense. I mean, that abortion is okay and is a woman's choice, and it's my body, my choice. Like, who with any don't want to get this banned on YouTube, but how can you anyway? Okay, so rid them of God's grace, weaken the will, and darken the intellect. And then you see public school education just getting worse and worse and worse. So then you don't have any intelligence, reason how to think, and then pump them up with sugar and medications and stuff. And so physically
poisonous
ill,
fluoride,
lazy, all kinds of stuff. So there's an attack on who hates humans the most. It's Satan, obviously. He's behind it all. But you see the progression there. I mean, they were all in the works for a long time, obviously. But we're very comfortable eating sugar. Guilty as charged. Very comfortable eating junk and being, not doing much and staying in our apartments and watching the internet rather than going out and doing things. So,
well, one thing I would say to that effect, Father, is that I look back, let's say 40 years when we were young, and we had 3 channels on TV, and they were all feeding us lies, and we had the food pyramid, and we all thought, hey, that's the way to go. And basically, these authorities, who are maybe not as purely evil then as they are now, but they were still in charge. They were evil. They were taking us a bad direction, and there was no counter. There was no way to rebut what they were doing. There was no internet. There was nothing, and maybe locally a church, possibly. But now at least we have with the internet and with all of our with the modern world, we now at least are awake to a lot of what's going on. We see what's going on, and I think people's light is shining through. Now these organizations that have basically been suppressing us for centuries, probably more or less, are getting more militant. They're getting more vile. They're getting more autocratic about things. But at the same time, we're seeing through it, and I think that there is a legitimate war going on today that we didn't have going on when I was you guys' age.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think it is a spiritual war, but I think to be, first of all, obviously we got to pray, receive the sacraments, but I think exactly as Father was saying too, I think we also have to train, and to actually be fit and healthy and ready to fight that spiritual battle physically. I think it's a really good, because again, I think it does work both ways. It's spiritual and physical. I think that goes back to masculinity, which is the thing they're you can tell society is truly afraid of actual masculinity, virtuous masculinity. I think that's another important thing. To it doesn't mean you have to be bodybuilders. I think that's a ridiculous, Andrew Tate type idea. But I think you do need to be healthy. And I think it's Father Geckle, I know right now, is doing some sort of workout challenge and stuff. And I really respect that, because I think, again, that's I think that helps also to shape our mindset and to keep us on the right path. But sorry, Father, go
ahead. It's gone. Whatever.
Okay. I kicked it out of Father's head. Sorry,
no, you're good. You're good. Yeah, Sister Clarisha here, who was a Notre Dame sister, I believe, before Vatican II. She's been a nun for a very, very long time, and had a very, very in-depth education, extremely well educated, in the convent, at the time. And one thing she often says One thing I always remember reading about in the ascetical theology course was that if you don't get enough sleep, you're going to be depressed. If you don't get enough sleep, you're going to be depressed. That's in a spiritual book. The body and soul work together, and some people will blame it on this or that, but lack of sleep. Why am I getting into this? I don't even know.
Probably because
lack of sleep,
Kevin got up at
bad
4
food,
a.m. to do this.
I'm starting to regret this
Yeah.
podcast.
yeah. But yeah, it's funny. I don't know where I was going with that, but just
No,
kind of
the
on the
physical-
score of just
Yeah, no,
physical
absolutely.
and
I see where you're going
being
with it. No,
well, whatever.
it makes sense. Yeah, and to be, and I think, I don't know. I guess again, I think that's why it irritates me. And I know Dad, and maybe I think you both as well, Father and Eric, the black pillars, the whole just the depressed mindset of everything's going to hell in a handbasket. It's all terrible. And I really think part of it is I know it's going to sound harsh, but I think part of it's effeminate. It's just this mentality of, I'm not going to fight it, or my fight is going to be to complain about it on Twitter.
I don't think it's that. I don't think it's that. I just think it's where the information, it's for some people it could be, but in general, I don't think that's a universal statement that's the cause. As I said at the beginning, I really think it's just where you're getting your information from, how much information you're consuming, from what sources, and that's going to shape the way you think about these things and what we can do about it, if anything. So I think that's the biggest thing. You can have people that are very manly that don't believe that there can be anything to do about, on the political sphere, because that's where they're getting information from.
But
that's my take on it. That's what I've seen.
My issue is the people who are actively inactive. The ones who are just like, no, just the actively all the time depressed, all the time only looking for the down, only looking to throw shade on anything. Anything good. What was it? I saw the other day what the Trump had the Ave Maria saying at one of his rallies. And it's like, yeah, sure, it's probably just a political stunt. Yeah, okay. But and so why do you have to find bad in everything? I just think there's something deeply
take the W, guys. Take the W. It's something we have a problem with.
I think it's martyr complex, kind of mixed, like Father said, a little bit with despair, right? There's some comfort in just being the victim instead of actually doing something to change it, even if it isn't much to do.
But isn't that effeminate? I'm sorry, that to me sounds sounds like it's not accurate. It's this idea of like, the world's so bad, so I'm just gonna whine about it on Twitter. I'm sorry, I can't handle it. I don't want to go. I'm going on a rant. I'm sorry. I'll stop. I'm gonna stop.
Don't rant.
Let me respond to a comment there.
The good thing is, I just had going on my rants, which I have to mention. Father Feeney published that yesterday.
Yeah,
any of you who are listening, it warms my heart to be accused of anything by a heretic. So I wake up in the morning and I see an insult from a Feeneyite, and I'm like, oh yes, feed me more.
I'm doing the right thing.
Yes. Anyway,
yeah. There's a couple people in there saying voting is not fighting. Agreed. What we're talking about is getting involved, helping people to shape things in your local area. That's what we're talking about, making a difference. Going and checking boxes isn't fighting, obviously. We're not politicians here. Okay, we're normal people that know that we're not trying to make a political slogan here that go out and vote. That's how you fight. I mean, that's how you maybe hopefully shape some things, but that's not what we're talking about fighting. We're talking about actually going out there and doing things and helping people, getting more involved in local things. That's what we're talking about. I've seen some clips on YouTube about school board meetings where in public schools, poor people have their kids in public school, and they actually get out there and try to do something about that and challenge these people on the school boards and stuff. That's doing something. Okay, that's the kind of thing that I think we're talking about. That and motivating people to, well, I would say on the spiritual level, motivating people to live the more full, live the faith more fully. Getting together for holy hours and reparation and praying the rosary at church, or getting together to talk about what they can do to help each other out, things like that. That just on the spiritual side or the community side, that's going to help build better bonds and amongst your fellow Catholics. and hopefully that can go somewhere, you know, and help be a good example to others outside the church, maybe. But so, yeah, voting is not fighting, you know, but trying to help out to make a positive change. That's what we're
Not voting
talking
is
about.
not fighting.
Right. So yeah, and I totally agree, Father. It's not like I don't mean that voting, if you don't vote, you're not manly. That's my, I guess I mean that this idea of I'm just going to complain about it. I'm just going to whine on Twitter. I'm not going to do anything. That's all.
Yeah.
That's my entire
No,
purpose. I think that is not masculine. And but I think we're saying the same thing. I think.
No, I get what
I
you're
think
saying. I was
we
just
agree.
responding
Yeah.
to some of, there were several comments
Yeah.
saying that, like, oh, you guys, you know, voting is fighting. Yeah, we know.
Right.
Don't
Yeah,
feed the
I think-
trolls, Father. Just ignore them.
Sorry, Eric, I can't help myself. I'm getting dopamine every time I read a new comment. I can't help myself.
That's another interesting topic, dopamine. Yeah. No,
I'm a
but it is.
millennial.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's a great podcast. Actually, I'll have to, anyone who can find that. I think I think you can look that up on the Catholic Family Podcast. I think if you search dopamine, you should be able to find it. That was really good with Dr. Dan from St. Gertrude's. Really fascinating to understand from a true expert, like an actual, like one of the best experts on dopamine, talking about how that affects our world. And
Yeah.
pretty disturbing, pretty crazy. And really, and what's crazy, and I'm going a little off topic here, but when you watch these shows, there was a movie, I don't know, probably 5-10 years ago now, that talked about, from the guys who created social media platforms, who actually engineered it and did all these different things. They talked about it and about how they did it and why they did it. And it's one of the most disturbing things. And it's just like, yeah, you know, we did it to, you know, to addict people and then to sell them. You know, that's what, because that's obviously what they do. You know, they sell you to companies. So that's the whole point of social media. So when you actually start thinking about, okay, that's interesting that social media is free. You know, okay, well, what are they selling? Whether, you know, some of them have ads, but they also are just, they're taking all of the things from you. And that was another interesting thing. I don't know if you guys saw this. This came out recently, that they said that you remember back in the day, like the MySpace days. So, Father Geckle, you may be too little,
I'm
but
too young.
So let's say,
I'm too little.
15,
Yes.
too little, too young. It's early still, Father.
Sorry.
But back in the day, you remember when we had all these questionnaires online? Like you had all the time, if you had a MySpace or Facebook at the very beginning, that was half of your content was filling out which if you could be an animal, what animal would you be? That type of a thing. I know people will remember this. And it was actually, I think someone saw that it was actually done, and all of this was being fed to the government, to I don't know if it's the CIA or whatever. So they're actually getting information on you and putting it away somewhere. Pretty creepy stuff. The more you learn about the things the government has actually done, man, creepy. MySpace was the best. That we miss it. Matt and I just talked about it. We'll save that for a Matt and Kevin on a Monday show, back in the day. But again, everyone, please like and share this video so that we can get people to vote. Eric, I wanted to go through. I don't want to take too much more time, because I think it's getting pretty late for, at least for Father. Father, are you East Coast or are you Central?
Central
Time. You're Central. Okay,
Yeah.
good. It's not too late for you. The one that I thought was really interesting, I'd be really curious to get Dad and Father's ideas on this, was Eric, what was the one we were talking about with the, let me look.
talked about a
The
couple of them.
imprisonment one was the one that
was
okay,
an
it logged me
interesting
out.
one.
Do you have that there? I logged me out of my voting.
If I can find it, let me put on my
platform.
glasses and flip through my. I'm just kidding.
Oh, Eric has
Give me a
glasses. But there's as Eric finds it, this was one of the interesting things that Eric and I are talking about. Because I think I asked Eric, so what do you think of the judges? And then I think Eric brought it up. Okay, so what do you think of this one? And it had to do with lengthening the imprisonment of
It's parole eligibility. So for crimes of violence, you'd have to serve at least 85% of your sentence in prison. And it's one of those where it's on the surface, yeah, that sounds good. Let's keep the prisoners there. But we started talking about it, and that's probably the one thing that I'm not sure. I'm not sure on in Colorado. So, Father,
Molly says Pop 128. Molly, can you copy that and comment it here, maybe, if you have it there? Yeah, because it is. Let me see if I can find it, because it's. Sorry, guys.
So a yes vote would require a person convicted of certain crimes of violence to serve at least 85% of their sentence in prison before being eligible for discretionary parole.
So that's interesting. I know.
Well, the
Dad, yeah,
moral
what do you think?
question, I mean, I think that I'm going to defer to Father on this one, because I think the moral question becomes, at what point do you serve the greater good as society by letting convicted felons, convicted violent felons, even back out on the streets? I mean, and I'm not saying that that should never happen, because there's probably benchmarks of rehabilitation that make them a low risk to society. And I mean, that's kind of a loaded question.
Hmm. And it's going to depend on every individual case.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So there isn't
And
any blanket statement, I would think. I mean, generally, you would think that, you have your sentence, you go with the sentence. But I don't know enough about the death row or, murder uh, convicts or whatever else. I don't know
But then
much
you
about
almost
that.
wouldn't do it then, right, Father? Because exactly, it's a tough one. But
You
I mean,
might,
because
yeah.
then if it's an individual case, you'd almost not want to make it you would almost not want to vote for it, because then it's saying that, yeah, you can't get parole. Because I mean, I
and
guess
there's a problem. There's an incentive problem there, right? So you're a
Right.
violent felon. You're in
You have no
prison,
incentive
and
to be rehabilitated.
exactly, you have no incentive to be rehabilitated, to convert, to become a better person, to all that stuff, right? And then there's also just the practical issue of, do we have prison space to keep that many people in that much longer? Yeah, it's a complicated question, and I think that's what
Well,
kicked
and
off the
then
idea to do this.
and then you
podcast.
have, becoming more lenient, like, well, 85%. Well, but I guess it's is it bringing it down from what
It's
was it
no, so
before?
currently, let's say you get sentenced to 50 years in prison. Currently, like with really good behavior, doing all the right things, maybe you can get out in 5 to 10, right? A fraction of that 50-year sentence. This law would require you to serve 42 years or whatever that 85% of that full sentence was.
Mm.
And so I guess my pitch would be, I think that disincentivizes good behavior. If you know you're going to be there and there's no benefit to having good behavior or rehabilitating, is that a
yeah.
good thing?
I mean, I
But
would
then there's also
argue,
the argument to be made, it's nice to serve the sentence that you were given by your peers and your jury and the judge.
but
So I don't know.
how dumb can our peers and our judges be? Look what's happened with Trump. I mean, just purely like made up stuff that they're convicting him for, and it just shows you it's like, okay, some of this stuff is absurd and it's insane. So like, do we actually trust our judicial system? And that's kind of one of my arguments. I mean, I wonder more about if it should be more of corporal punishment. That if someone's a sex offender, okay, they're chemically castrated. If they murder someone, okay, you cut off both their hands or something. That's the type of stuff that they did back in the Middle Ages, and it sounds brutal, and I mean it is brutal. But I mean, I guess in my mind, it's like, okay, but there's still is that worse than being locked up with other prisoners for your entire life? I mean,
Yeah, I've heard a good case I'd like to do, and I think it's Singapore, where you commit a misdemeanor crime, certain ones, like theft, and you get caned for it, and you get basically spanked, and it hurts like heck, and it's extremely embarrassing, but it's over. The state doesn't have to deal with you, and
I love
and
that.
you learned a lesson.
I love it. I just think that makes so much more sense to be put in the stocks. Say whatever. Let's say if you're distributing marijuana, okay, does it make sense then to put these guys in prison with like murderers or other marijuana distributors for 5 years, and you think they're gonna come out and be good members of society? It's like, well, what do we expect to happen to these people? And so if instead you put them in the stocks in front of the local Walmart, and people threw tomatoes at their faces, I think that maybe that's way too old fashioned, but I think there's something there that would be much more, I don't know.
I
Immediate.
like what Carmen said down there. Follow the money is a proposition funded by companies who run the prisons. Follow the money. I listened to some people talk about that on podcast about prisons building the prisons, running the prisons is a business.
It's privatized sometimes, right?
It's
Yeah.
privatized in the US.
Yeah. It's interesting.
That'd be a good thing to look into. I don't know. My gut thought on it, without a whole lot of thought, is just keep the sentence a sentence.
Hop shizzle. They absolutely should be on the ballot. I would vote
Along
yes
with
every
women
single
voting.
time for this stuff. I love it. And I think but I mean, it just makes so much more sense. But it's like, again, corporal punishment. It's like with with some children, you need to, they need a quick spanking, and then they get in their head, this is what, I shouldn't do that because, boom, it's in there. But I mean, just think about it. Okay, if your kid did something bad, like, okay, then I'm going to lock you up in your room for 2 days with other bad kids, and then they're supposed to come out and behave better. It's like, oh yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I mean, it's ridiculous. I think that, I understand. Okay,
yeah, but if you have somebody serving a 50-year whatever, and you think they're 20 or 30 when they get in, they're going to get out when?
Yeah.
Well, the judges
in extreme cases, okay. I mean,
judges are going to have to
do
those. Instead of a 50-year sentence, they're going to have to give an 8-year sentence. And you're going to have to serve 85% of it. So they're going. I think they'll ratchet that accordingly, I would imagine.
Yeah,
Father, to answer your question, it was spearheaded by a conservative nonprofit. Okay. I think with the intent to keep more criminals behind bars.
Gotcha.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a tough one, but I think that's, again, it's another point of why it's interesting to get these things out and talk with your friends about it. And it doesn't mean you're going to have all the answers. I mean, but it just, I don't know. I think it helps to even say it out loud, and you're just talking it. You're saying the words rather than just reading them. Like, oh, again, his father had that great example before, that if you just read it and it looks good at the start and you vote yes on it, maybe you vote for something that's really, quite dangerous. So it's voting intelligently is also part of this. So just going and voting is not the only thing, because then you're going to have an uninformed vote, which actually might hurt. So make sure that you are informed. And someone said earlier, whoever this guy is who just keeps complaining about everything. First of all, this is not a Trump podcast. I understand you hate Trump. Good for you, buddy. I don't care. Like, seriously, that's not what this podcast is about. I mean, fine. Okay. You think Trump's evil, then don't vote for him. That's not the point. The point is, again, to go and vote for these other things. But the point that you're saying that you have to know and read the entire Constitution in order to vote, I don't think, why exactly? I don't quite understand.
I think you should have an idea of who or what you're voting for. And if there's a proposition like this where you're like, you have no idea who's behind it, what to do, just leave it blank, right? You don't have to fill everything out.
You don't have to fill, right? True.
Yeah, right, exactly. Good boy. Are there anyone else have any other propositions or anything that you have for us? Maybe any questions for Father? Because again, this is coming up. What we're voting in 3 weeks, under 3 weeks now, I think it is. Isn't it 20 days, 19 days, something like that? So it's coming up, and I think this is a perfect time again to go out and do the research to figure out what these things are, and especially people who do have more of a mind for this, do it. Maybe talk to your priest about it, and then get your friends together and talk about it. I can't stress this enough, because I remember this even when we were in Denver. I was a little informed, when I was probably 25, 26, something like that. I wasn't overly intellectual, that's for sure. But I followed politics a little bit. And I remember talking to some of my friends who were 18, 19, and they really, truly had really no idea, like zero idea, because they just don't follow it. But I think it's important that, if they have that, right, that they start to do it, and they don't just do it blindly, because again, that doesn't help anything either. You say, okay, we're going to go vote. You get to the ballot box. Okay, I know Trump, but what else? And again, as we've said, Trump, and I think that's a really interesting thing too, that I think that's part of the agenda, right? The part of the agenda is to the media to make it so that we think it is only about Trump versus Kamala. And I think that is absolutely part of the case. They just want us to totally forget everything else, just like Trump and Kamala, and in the end,
and ignore everything that's going on in your backyard.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
What did we say earlier about the Freemasons and all of their lodges in every single town and throughout the country?
Right, exactly. Well, and it's interesting too, because I mean, if you actually do look at the Constitution, obviously what our country has become is not what they had planned. It was never meant to be this federalized and globalized. I mean, so yeah, it isn't what our founding fathers intended it to be. I think we all agree with that, at least.
Well, the founding fathers assumed that this is only going to work with a moral people and basically a Christian people.
Right.
And we've become a not moral people. And so really the Constitution it's on life. It's not dead, but it's on life support.
Well, and I'm sure Father probably doesn't want to argue this because we might get banned. But I mean, you look at the Civil War, and that's another one of these things that historically they make it really easy. So of course the North were the good guys, but it's like, yeah, okay, slavery, of course, is not, that's not a question. We all know the moral side of slavery, but the actual idea of why they went to war, which was much more about states' freedoms and states' rights, that's pretty interesting topic, because that is not as clear as people are taught. Abraham Lincoln was the greatest president of all time. Really? Maybe if you look at it from the modern perspective, I think the one who really changed things, this is what, already 160 years ago,
an empire. Yeah.
turned it into a federalist empire, which it was never intended to be.
Yeah.
My counterpoint to that, Kevin, and that's sort of relevant. Sorry, Father. It's sort of relevant to the abortion thing today, where yes, states should be sovereign, states should have their rights. The South was right in that portion of it, but they wanted their right to own slaves, which is obviously a moral wrong, right? And so you see Trump and all the conservatives pushing this now, where, oh, let's just give abortion to the states and then we can kind of wash our hands. It's like, that's one of the areas that I would argue the federal government should be involved, right? Because it's a life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Like you're getting rid of life with the abortion thing. That really shouldn't be left to the states. I mean, better left to the states than have a federal abortion allowance
of it.
Yeah. But so that's why the killing of Roe versus Wade was a good thing. But it really should be a national thing to outlaw abortion. Like, it's a national thing. If a state said, hey, Texas wants murder to be okay, or Texas wants slavery to be okay, that's not within their rights, because it's against the moral law.
But do you think that the Civil War was primarily because of slavery? Because I agree with you there. If that was a primary,
you can't take the two things away, right?
Yeah,
the Civil War was, their states wanted the right to own slaves. Right. That was the thing. So from the slavery perspective, the North was in the right. From the states' rights perspective, outside of slavery, the South was in the right. But that was the major states' right issue that they were fighting for.
Yeah. Yeah. True. Father, comment? No. Save it for another podcast.
I'm sorry I interrupt you, Father. I don't mind.
No, you're good.
Kevin,
you're good.
Interrupting you.
No, definitely interesting thing. But
I will simply join in that the only foreign power that gave any support to the South was Pope Pius IX in the Papal States. He did send ships to support him, and that says something.
And Robert E. Lee was a devout Catholic and a good man.
He was Catholic.
I don't think he was Catholic.
He wasn't?
I
didn't hear that. I know he was very Christian.
I don't think he was Catholic.
Cool guy.
Yeah.
What's the color pill when you just think everyone is Catholic?
White.
Yellow.
Never seen one. Homeschool. I know. It's homeschool.
But I guess, I guess one of my points is that we, the idea of what our country is now is not, it's not what it should be. And so I don't know. The idea being that the federal government is too big, it's too overreaching, and so we do mostly need to care about the much more about the local government, because that's what's actually going to matter. And I do think that if we do that, you're going to see more effect, because if you see the local government working correctly, you're going to have more people who understand it and appreciate it, and then that's going to spread. And I think, again, it's something we see here. You see people who are just, they're fed up with the big government, because the big government's bad and makes bad decisions for people. If you're in Belgium and you're making decisions for people in Greece are being like, what are you doing? That's not what we actually need or want. And I think that again, importantly, to vote for the smaller issues, and not just argue that Trump is a pro-sodomite and stuff. It's like, okay, these are issues that which we all agree on. Trump is not a Catholic Christian amazing candidate. He's not. None of us think that. No one is saying that, guys. No one. Did anyone listen to Father at the beginning? It's not a principle of we're voting because he's Catholic or Christian. It's because he is the lesser of two evils, which I dare you, pro Ecclesia Deo, whatever your name was here in the comment section, please argue that he's not the lesser of two evils. I would love to hear your argument.
Do a spreadsheet and talk about the moral issues and talk about Trump's stance and Kamala's stance, and tell me that there's anyone that Trump's going to be worse or as bad as Kamala. It just, it's a matter of perspective.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, I think my good friends, it's probably time to about wrap this up. Everyone who's been in here, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Maybe something we might do something similar again. I definitely like the live streams. Was it too late for you, Father? It's not
I'm
past your
fine.
bedtime. Yeah, Dad,
stay
Eric,
up.
it's not because actually 4 a.m. actually is okay. We'll see how I feel by about 2 p.m. Then I'll be able to tell if I ever want to do this again. But the time actually worked better than I
Come
expected.
on, be
even though
manly,
I
Kevin. Come on.
yeah, exactly. Be man. To get up and do a cold shower, do some push-ups, and then do a podcast.
There we go.
Right?
I think you had more viewers than other time slots, didn't you?
We did, yeah. I think this worked pretty well. We were also
Yeah,
streaming on Twitter. That's part of it.
That's why
but yeah, it
Kevin
just makes
talks
sense in the
politics
evening.
all the time. It's all for views.
Of
That's all
course
that
it
matters.
is. It's for the money, it's for the paycheck
That's
coming
right.
in
That's right.
from YouTube.
Oh, speaking of which, I got my mug today. This
All
is perfect timing.
Nice.
Catholic
Nice.
Family Podcast mug.
Hey,
Nice.
We are pushing the merch now too.
Pushing the merch. Yeah,
Well,
getting rich.
But that was cool.
That's another story which we won't go into about
Trust
about
me,
the
guys, we're not going to be selling these things.
merchandising.
We'll give them away to friends and family, but we are not selling them.
No, it's harder than you think. I'm simping for Trump. Thank you, Romulus. I know I've said so many positive things about Trump today. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, obviously you've been listening really closely, Romulus. I appreciate people who comment and help the algorithms, even though you hate listening to my voice. I do. That actually does. Again, as I said for the Fenites, it warms my heart that you guys will help me out, bring in more viewers, even though you don't like what I have to say. So
hey, anybody who wants a mug, who's listening here, put your I don't know,
$20.
It's $10 shipping.
Capitalism, folks. Capitalism.
The shipping is
bonus,
insane. Yeah.
But no, that's okay. Well, we've got some extras. We're willing to send them out. Send your contact information to Kevin89Davis at gmail.com, and we'll try to get you some mugs out.
And actually, really seriously, if anyone wants to merchandise, we're not going to do it, at least no time soon. It's just too much work. But what you can do, if you want a hoodie, I see Connor says he wants a hoodie. I can send you the official logo of Catholic Family Podcast, and you can literally go online, make your own hoodie, buy it yourself, pay a lot less, and have a Catholic Family Podcast hoodie. Because I think that's probably the best. Then it works for us. It's marketing, and it's a lot cheaper for you because, as we found out, to do it, it's a pain. You have to add extra steps. And if you're going to do a hoodie yourself with just the logo, you'll pay, I don't know, $15. If you're going to buy it from us, it's probably going to be 30. It's just because you have the extra step, it's just going to be more. So that would be my recommendation. If you want that, we can send you the logo. Email me, Kevin89Davis at gmail.com. Because we'd love for people to have our merchandise. It's just at this point, it's just truly not worth it. And we're not in this for the money. I think everyone knows. I hope everyone knows we're kidding. And that's it is certainly not about the money. We can show you how much money we make from YouTube. It's not a great deal. And whatever I do have, I have to send it to Father McKenna, at least part of it. That was part of the deal. Also just kidding. All right, everyone, thank you for being here. Please share this podcast. We do hope that it helps people to, clear in their minds. Again, it's not just about Trump and Kamala. And that's really the important thing. To remember that there's a lot of important things: school choice, abortion, taxes. There's a lot of things that are important on the ballot that, I think people do need to vote for. The Catholics absolutely should vote for. Father also said, stated how important it is to be part of our civic society. The church is very clear on it. And please go get informed and inform your younger friends. I think that's the really important. Deliver truckloads of hoodies to local. Yes,
we're all about that. A little civil disobedience going on here. Yep.
Yes. Go and just throw them on the windshields of some of the cars. That's a cool idea. No, seriously, guys, I would love for anyone who wants merch, just email me and I'll send you the logo. I think that's the best way to do it. Otherwise, I think we do have some mugs. Maybe that's something that Dad can work with. So
extras, yeah.
We do have some mugs.
Cars would be nice. Get a
bumper stickers.
Sticker. Yeah, that'd be cool.
That would be cool.
I know Father Zapata does that.
Does he do bumper stickers? That's awesome. Yeah, but see, Father Zapata is so much more ahead in these things than I am. I don't. It kind of drives me a little crazy that a priest who literally runs a parish of like 400 people is so much more. It's so much better at marketing and stuff. He's so good at it.
He's so talented.
Man, I'm just like, how do you do these things, Father? So, Father, if you're listening, you can always help us with our CFP marketing and stuff. But no, we appreciate you all. Thank you for being here, Father Geckle. It really was a pleasure having you here. We're gonna do for sure. We're gonna do a live stream on election night. I'm going to take the next day off. So I'm willing to go deep into the night. Let's just say that. I don't know if it's going to work. I think it may or may not, but I think it'd be interesting to have a group of guests that come on for 15, 20 minutes at a time, 5 minutes at a time, give their opinions. I know Father, I guess I won't say his name because I don't know if you'd want me to, but I've had a few priests who've reached out and said that they would be interested in joining the show, the live show. So we will do that on November 5th. I don't know. I guess you guys tell me when would Dad, maybe you can say, when would be the best time to start that on
You're
election?
want to start around 7 p.m.
7
Eastern,
p.m. or something like that. Okay.
That's
Yeah,
Virginia,
whenever Virginia
closes. And if my predictions are right, it's going to be over within a half an hour. But
it's looking interesting though. I just saw Georgia. They had 250 million early. No, that's too many. 250 million, 250,000. How many people are in Georgia? 250,000.
They're all voting for Joe Biden.
I've had one cup of coffee. Yeah, exactly. They're all voting. Yeah, exactly. And half of them are dead. 250,000 early voters, which I think they said is double the norm, which usually would lean Democrat though.
The story of the early voting is the inner city black communities are not coming out to vote so far, and that's in Minnesota. I think it's Minnesota, Virginia, Georgia, a couple of the other states that have early voting. That's been the trend. The rural voters are coming out in big numbers. The inner city people are not coming out in big numbers at all.
Interesting. Samurai bumper sticker would be a really cool idea. It's another thing that these are things that I think would be really. If anyone is, this is not actually hard. You need to just get the thumbnails. You need to do a little designing. I can't imagine the bishop minding people doing samurai bumper stickers. I mean, I don't think that would be a problem.
You're just putting the website on something on there. I don't see why not.
I don't see why not either. Yeah, maybe don't put Father Geckle's home phone number, but that would be kind of funny. But no, don't do it, guys.
Would it though?
Call anytime, 24/7. Father Geckle. I'm just kidding, guys.
Thank you.
But no, bumpers. I love that idea of do samurai, do any of these Catholic groups. I think hoodies. That's where it's at. No, I appreciate.
Fran, I'm loving the Lord of the Rings references, by the way.
That's true. Samwise got elected 7 times as mayor. That's a good point. And as Fran said, we are just waiting for the King of Gondor to come home and save us. That's a fair point. All right, perfect, guys. We'll be back for a live show November 5th. Maybe also sometime in the meantime. As you all might know by now, it's pretty much on our shoestrings how we work. It's kind of, hey guys, here's an interesting idea. Eric and I have a conversation. Hey, we should do a live show. And it turns out it was very nice. It was nice having you three here. Nice having you guys all in the comments. I think it's a nice way. I think just to, I don't know, have conversations, have you guys part of the conversation.
It's
I think
the beauty of the live show is actually the conversation.
It's really nice. Yeah, because you guys really do add a lot to the show. Some of you less than others. Romulus, you can just maybe shut up next time. Who is the other guy? I'm kidding.
Kevin,
I'm partly kidding.
Free speech, Kevin. Free speech.
Exactly. Free speech, except for to the Fenites. All right, everybody. Until next time. God bless. That's the way to. I'm just waiting until I'm personally attacked by the Diamond Brothers. I have not actually succeeded in my mission in this podcast. So I need to get a personal attack video from them, or I will just not.